I don't know if anyone's ever going to read this. Hell, I'm not even sure why I'm writing it. Habit, maybe, or guilt. Maybe I think putting it down on paper will stop it from chewing through my head all day. Whatever the reason, this notebook's the only thing I'm leaving behind. Everything else is already gone. Named Samson, or Ranger Samson. If you ever caught me in uniform, I've been working Northern Ridge National Park for, what, 16 years now? Yeah, long time. Long enough that the rookies use a joke, I came with the trees. Most of those kids didn't even make it through a season. Too soft, too bored. You'd be shocked how many folks say they want to escape it all, then lose their minds over bad cell signal. But me? No. I've always belonged here. I was raised on tents and firewood, cold canned beans, and waking up to the sound of something big moving in the dark. Probably a raccoon, maybe a bear, or maybe just Dad, stumbling around trying to get the fire going again before Mom realized he let it die. We didn't have much. Other families spent their summers flying off to Disney or boarding cruise ships. Us, we had a leaky old tent and a gas stove that screamed like a dying goat. But we had the woods, and that was enough. I was about 10 when I saw my first ranger. Big guy, full beard, sunglasses, striding around like he owned the forest in that green and brown uniform. He let me hold his flashlight while he checked out my sister's foot, stepped on a rusted nail. Nothing too deep. I must have asked that ranger 1,000 questions, and he answered every single one. Guess that stuck with me. I didn't go to college, didn't see the point, went straight into conservation work. Took night classes when the station had power, and I had enough energy left after my shift. Got my license, got my patch. Been here ever since. Most of the teams cycled out over the years. They came and went like the seasons. But I stayed. And Bailey, of course. Bailey's my dog. Australian shepherd. Sharp as a tack, a little too nosy for her own good. And hands down the best partner I've ever had. Got her from a shelter down in Oak Hill 12 years back. She was all skin and nerves, left behind when her old family moved out of state. First time I saw her, she came and sat right by my boots and didn't budge. That was it. She picked me. We've been glued together ever since. She's not just a dog. She's crew. The kids on school tours use a swarm her, all begging her to roll over or do some trick. She'd play it cool at first, then give in and charm the socks off them, and their snacks. Had a sixth sense for granola bars. That one. We had our rhythm, me and her. Morning started before dawn. I'd fire up the old stove for coffee, while Bailey posted up at the ranger station door, ears alert, eyes scanning the tree line. Breakfast was toast. If we were lucky, sometimes whatever we could nuke, if the generator was behaving. If not, cold cereal and warm milk from the cooler. Then came rounds. Rounds meant hiking the trails, checking for fallen limbs, clearing debris, making sure the signposts weren't tagged or the cabins busted into. Every now and then, we'd find beer cans or the scorched remains of some illegal fire pit. City kids thinking they're survival experts. We'd write up reports, snap a few photos, leave warnings tacked to trees. Bailey loved the smell of ash. Sniffed it like I was telling her some deep, ancient story. We'd take our break mid-morning, usually down by the lake. She'd chase frogs while I sat on the dock, watching the fog lift off the water like steam from a slow breath. Sometimes, I'd wonder if I should have done more with my life. Something bigger. But I always came back to the quiet. You don't get quiet like this in the real world. People think being a ranger is just babysitting trees. But it's more than that. It's fixing busted fences, pulling folks out of creeks, teaching wide-eyed kids how not to get eaten by bears. It's endless paperwork. It's tourists who never listen. It's search parties that drag into the small hours. And sometimes, yeah, it's carrying back a body. Not often, but enough. Still, I loved it. All of it. Even the rough days. We used to have a full team here. 6 of us, Jake, Amanda, Torres, Pete, and Ellie. Every one of them had been scouts. Eagle badges, merit ribbons, survival camp veterans. They came in fresh-faced, armed with clipboards and big ideas. I watched them grow into the job, some faster than others. But eventually we became a kind of family. Pete even carved a wooden plaque for the station wall. The Green Watch. Corny as hell, sure, but we wore it like a badge of honor. Over the years, folks moved on. Better jobs. Families. New adventures out west. Amanda was the last to leave before me. She left in spring. Said she wanted to try something closer to civilization. I think the woods got to her in the end. She never said as much, just smiled too wide and scratched Bailey behind the ears one last time. I didn't ask questions, didn't want the answers, and now it's just me. Or it was, and I guess that's the real reason I'm writing. See, I'm not a hero. I'm not some square-jawed ranger out of a movie, haunted by a tragic past and destined to save the day. I'm just a guy who loves the woods, a guy who believed that if you respected the land, it'd respect you right back. But that's not how it works. Not always. The forest doesn't care who you are, and something changed out here. I'm not ready to write about that part yet. Not now. Maybe not ever. I just needed to start at the beginning, with the good stuff, when Bailey still rolled in pine needles like it was her personal bed, when the team still cracked dumb jokes over the radio, tried to one-up each other with the worst puns imaginable, when the biggest problems were busted fuel tanks or some stubborn hiker who thought trail markers were just suggestions. That part was real. It mattered. And maybe if I write it all down piece by piece, I could hold on to what it felt like before everything went sideways. It started this summer. June, maybe. Hard to pin the exact day. But I remember the feeling. Hot. Thick air hot. Like the whole park had just stretched its arms after a long sleep and was breathing deep for the first time. That's what summer always feels like here. Families rolling in with overstuffed minivans. Kids hanging their heads out the windows like golden retrievers, already screaming about marshmallows and fishing poles. Dads trying to back up trailers like they'd never reverse a vehicle in their lives. Moms gripping their printed campground maps like they were ancient scrolls leading to buried treasure. Busy season means all hands on deck. You got folks trying to set up grills on hiking trails, little kids chasing raccoons like they're Pokemon, and teenagers playing survivalist past curfew like they're auditioning for some wilderness reality show. We used to joke that we needed more rangers just to stop the humans from accidentally killing themselves. Bailey? She was in heaven. She trotted around from campsite to campsite like she owned the place, like she was a damn mayor of the forest. Everyone knew her. People started packing extra dog biscuits just in case they crossed paths with her on a trail. She had a whole route, too. Cabin 6, older couple, always had jerky. The Thompsons near the west entrance gave her half their scrambled eggs every morning like it was part of the ranger program. Honestly, she worked the crowd better than the rest of us ever could. The woods were alive, buzzing, chirping, rustling. Chipmunks crashing through the underbrush like they weighed 20 pounds. Birds yelling from the canopy. Laughter. You get a lot of that in the early weeks of summer. Before the sunburn set in. Before the mosquito bites drive people half mad. Before folks remembered that nature doesn't always play fair. I thought it was going to be a good season. One of the busiest. I was even training a new recruit. Quiet kid from some state college named Ralph. Smart. Nervous. Loved rules, kept a tiny notebook in his shirt pocket, wrote down everything like he expected the Pines to test him on it later. He was a good kid, asked a lot of questions, especially about the old mining trails on the east side. That area has been off limits for years now. Mines shut down back in the late 60s. Whole sections unstable. Sinkholes, collapsed shafts, the works. We got warning signs and barricades up all over. But that never stops the adventurous types, especially the kids. The first report came in early July. Around 5 p.m. station line buzzed once, then twice. A boy and his parents came in to report something strange he'd seen out near the eastern woods. Said it was by one of the old collapsed shafts, maybe a quarter-mile past the boundary markers. I met them at Station 2, the one by the gravel lot. The parents looked sheepish, like they were apologizing in advance for wasting my time. But the kid? Not so much. He said his name was Jimmy, maybe 14. Skinny, wore one of those oversized black band tees that all the teenagers seem to live in these days. Said he'd wandered off the trail a bit while his folks were grilling. Just wanted to snap a few photos for a school project, erosion or something like that. He pulled out this old iPhone, screen cracked to hell like it had been dropped down a cliff, scrolled to a couple pictures, and handed it over. Both shots were grainy, zoomed in too far, dim lighting, mostly trees and shadows. But in the second one, near the middle of the frame, there was something tall, way too tall, thin like a scarecrow with no stuffing. Looked like skin stretched tight over bone, just standing there between two pines that had to be 12 feet high. It had arms, or at least something shaped like arms. But what really got me was the head. Or, I guess, what should have been the head. It wasn't a head. It looked like a speaker. A metal horn, like one of those old air raid sirens they used to mount on rooftops during the Cold War. It hit me strange. Set something crawling under my skin. But I laughed it off. Told him it was probably nothing. Some old mining equipment, maybe. Light playing tricks on the lens. Cheap phone cameras do that, especially at dusk. The parents seemed relieved. Thanked me, said they'd head back to camp. But the kid, Jimmy, he just stared at me. Not angry. Just quiet. Like he knew I didn't believe him. Like he'd seen something I didn't want to see. After they left, that photo kept running through my mind. Later that evening, I was walking Bailey along the northern ridge, and it still stuck with me. I didn't report officially, just jotted it down in the logbook, thinking it was probably a one-off. People see weird things in the woods all the time. Trees fall in odd ways. Animal tracks get mistaken for something else. Add a teenager's imagination, and suddenly you've got yourself a campfire story. But it wasn't a one-off. A week later, another report came in, this time from a couple of college kids hiking near the Firewatch Trail. They said they spotted something in the distance, tall, unmoving, pale gray. At first, they thought it was a moose, but then realized it didn't have legs like one. Didn't move like anything they'd ever seen. No photos this time. Just said it stood there while they watched, then vanished when they looked away for a second. Again, I brushed it off. Heat exhaustion, maybe. You hike 6 miles uphill in August. Your brain tricks you. I told them that, but still, I wrote it down, and then it kept happening. Every few days, reports from different people, different parts of the park. All the same story. Something too tall, shaped all wrong, spotted near or in the woods around the old mine lands. Some had photos, most didn't, but the ones with pictures all showed the same blurry shape. You couldn't prove anything from the photos, but you couldn't completely deny it either. Of course, the story hit the internet fast. Forums, Reddit threads, conspiracy blogs lighting up overnight. One post even called it Siren Head, a kind of urban legend, but not from around here. From up north, maybe Canada. No one really knows how it got into our woods. If it even did at all. Probably just kids connecting dots that weren't there. Still, it caught on. More hikers started showing up, asking strange questions. We had to put up more signs near the mines, but people ignored them. You tell someone not to look for a monster, and that's all they want to do. That's when I started to worry. Not about monsters, at least not yet. I just knew how dangerous these woods could be. Old shafts that could swallow you whole. Rusted machinery left to rot. Rocks that crumble under a careless step. We've always had our share of injuries. Sprained ankles, twisted knees, sometimes worse. But this felt different. Like trouble walking through the trees in boots way too big for it. I didn't realize it then, but that first blurry photo, that tall shape standing in the shadows near the mine trail, that was just a beginning. The first domino falling in a line stretching a mile long. We were only just starting to hear it. For a little while, things were okay. The whole Siren Head story spread fast. We didn't start it, but we didn't exactly fight it either. People started calling it Siren Head Park online, and the name caught fire. Some of the younger rangers leaned into it, snapping photos of old, rusty sirens along the trails, posting vague captions like, "We heard something weird today," followed by a ghost emoji. I didn't love it, but I got it. More attention meant more visitors, and more visitors meant more money. The station finally got new batteries for the trail radios, and Bailey got a proper harness with her name stitched into the side. She looked official. She liked that. We had record numbers that month. Campgrounds packed. Parking lots full. Waiting lists for waterfall tours. I'd never seen the place so alive. Kids laughing. Teenagers daring each other to go monster hunting after sundown. Families roasting marshmallows like nothing bad could ever happen out here. The new recruits loved it. Most were in their 20s, fresh out of college. They probably expected long, boring days and endless paperwork. But now they had stories, action, a little danger, just enough to keep their boots moving. They smiled more, talked faster. But that didn't last. The first accident didn't seem like much. A man twisted his ankle on the old cliffside trail near the upper basin. Loose rocks, no surprise. We chalked it up to carelessness. Told ourselves it could have happened to anyone. The second was harder to explain. A woman came running into Station 3 in the middle of the night, looking like she hadn't slept for days. Said her tent had been slashed. Not by a bear, she was certain of that. Something clean, straight like a knife, but too high off the ground to make sense. Still, we didn't panic. Campers drink too much sometimes. Raccoons dig in weird ways. Then came the missing pets. First, a cat left leashed outside a camper overnight. Then a beagle known to wander but always come back disappeared. Then 2 dogs went missing at the same time, from opposite ends of park. We found one leash still tied to a tree, chewed clean through. That's when I started keeping Bailey closer. She didn't like it. Used to running ahead, checking clearings, circling back to nudge me like she was in charge. Now, I kept her leashed even on open trails. She didn't fight it, but looked at me like she didn't quite understand. Then people started going missing. At first, just a few hours, families returning from hikes sure to remember. Then a whole group vanished. A family of 4. Their tents still zipped up, food untouched, radio silent. We found them later that day, a mile from where they should have been, all sitting under a tree, not speaking. 2 couldn't remember how they got there. One kept asking for her brother, even though he was right beside her. The last just sat blank-faced, like he'd been unplugged. That night, I couldn't sleep. Calls started coming in more often. People saying they saw something moving just beyond the trees. Tall, always silent, never chasing, just watching, standing. We started keeping better records. Maps with pins marking sightings. They all circled the same area. The abandoned mines and the woods nearby. We expanded the restricted zone, posted more warnings. It didn't help. Then the voices started. Not from the trees, not anything we heard ourselves, but people kept saying they'd followed sounds. A baby crying. Someone calling their name, a voice they recognized. Sometimes a mother, sometimes a brother, sometimes someone they hadn't seen in years. One woman we found waist deep in a bramble thicket. Clothes torn, legs bleeding. She said she'd followed her husband's voice. He'd been dead for 5 years. Another man walked 5 miles off trail, trying to find a child he thought was lost. When we reached him, he didn't say a word, just stared into the woods, breathing like he'd run a marathon. Then the boy fell. It was one of the tour groups. We were walking them along the ridge where you can see the waterfall from above. There's a spot where the trees clear and the land drops sharply down to a rushing stream. I turned my back for 10 seconds. Next thing I knew, Bailey was barking and half the group was screaming. The boy had stepped over the edge. No hesitation, like he hadn't even seen it, like he wasn't trying to stop. He went straight down into the water. I ran. Bailey ran faster. She went in after him into that freezing current. Teeth locked onto the collar of his jacket. She dragged him out somehow, her paws scrabbling over the rocks. The boy, choking, coughing, gasping. When he calmed down, he told me he heard someone crying for help, said it sounded like a sister. But his sister was back at the cabin 2 miles away. That one made the news. Local papers ran the story. Hero dog saves boy from riverfall. Bailey got a medal from the town. I hunted on her collar. She tried to chew it off. After that, we shut down tours, at least for a while. But that didn't stop the kids. They kept sneaking in after hours, slipping through fences, hopping signs. They came with cameras and flashlights and friends egging them on, hoping to catch the monster go viral, get famous. It got harder to find them each time. We'd spend hours combing the grounds. Sometimes they'd pop back up on their own, sometimes not. One night, we found 3 of them crouched near the old mine shaft, backs pressed to a crumbling wall, eyes wide like dinner plates. None of them spoke for the rest of the night. They didn't need to. I knew what they'd seen. The monster. After the kids saw it, everything got worse. There wasn't a day without someone filing a report about something strange. We tried to stay calm, tried to keep things running like usual, but you could feel it in the team. People weren't talking as much over the radios. They walked faster on patrol. They avoided the East Woods, even though we never officially said to. And then the bodies started showing up. Not people. First it was animals. Deer mostly. We'd find them in places they shouldn't be. Lying in the middle of a trail, or right next to the ranger cabins. Whole carcasses torn open in ways that didn't make sense. No teeth marks. No signs of struggle. Just opened up. Ribs like broken sticks. Everything inside scooped out. At first, I thought it might be a bear or a pack of coyotes, but none of the prints matched. And then one morning, we found a doe hanging upside down from one of the old wooden beams of the mining shack. Limbs twisted like twigs. No sign of how it got there. No blood. No struggle. Just gone. That was when the dread really set in. We were no longer dealing with an old myth or teenage dares. Something real was out there, and it wasn't just watching anymore, but the bodies were too clean. No blood trails, no drag marks. It was like something had done it fast and careful, and just left the rest. Bailey would not go near them. Every time we found one, she'd lower her ears and back away. Wouldn't even sniff. Just stared at the trees like something was waiting. We closed the park not long after that. They didn't say it was because of the sightings or the accidents. Officially, it was budget cuts. Said attendance was dropping, though we couldn't afford to keep all the stations open. They called it a seasonal reallocation. Said we'd all be moved to other parks by the fall. But I knew what it was. They needed this place cleared fast. Whatever lived in those woods, whatever we stirred up with our dumb stories and half-jokes, it was real. And nobody wanted to stick around and figure out what it wanted. Most of the team left within days, and I don't blame them. I stayed, not because I thought I could fix anything. I just couldn't leave it like that. This place had been my home for 16 years. I knew every trail, every tree, every bend in the river. It didn't feel right to leave without a goodbye. I offered to do the final cleanup. 2 more weeks. That's all I asked. I tried leaving Bailey with my sister 3 times. She lives 2 miles outside the park. I told Bailey to stay put, that I had something to do, and I wanted her safe. But every single time, she escaped that house and found her way back to me. It was like she knew. We did the last rounds ourselves. Pulled down the signs, locked up the supply sheds, made sure no campers were left behind. It was quiet by then. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears, like the whole forest is holding its breath. Bailey stayed close, her nose to the ground, her body stiff. Even she didn't dare wander far. As we locked the main gate one last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done yet, that something was still out there, waiting for someone to come back, waiting for me. The trails felt different, lighter somehow, like the park had let go. The forest wasn't buzzing anymore. Not with bugs, not with birds, not with anything. Even Bailey didn't run ahead. She stuck close to my legs, her tail down. She was watching, always watching. One afternoon, we found another deer. This one wasn't fresh. Flies were everywhere. Its legs were missing. Not torn off, just gone, like they'd been removed, not eaten. Its head was twisted backward, tongue hanging out like a dry rag. That night, I barricaded the cabin doors for the first time in years. I still remember the last day like it happened a few minutes ago. I just finished sweeping the last of the bunkhouse. No one had stayed there in weeks, but I wanted to be thorough. Dust clung to everything. Bunks, windows, the coffee pots. Someone forgot to clean. It felt like a place waiting to be erased. I got back to the ranger station just before dark. The sun was low, lighting the trees gold like they were on fire. I fed Bailey, poured myself what was left of the instant coffee, and sat at the desk, looking out over the ridge. I thought I'd feel something. Peace, maybe. Closure. But all I felt was tired. I stepped out of the ranger station with Bailey at my side and scanned the trees behind the ridge. The park was quiet. The kind of quiet that should have meant everything was over. Then I noticed it. A flicker of orange light low on the horizon, near the forest edge beyond the service road. It wasn't the sun. The sun had dropped behind the hills already. This light was fire. I stood still for a moment, hoping it was a trick of the last daylight, but it held steady. The park was supposed to be closed. I felt Bailey stiffen beside me, hackles rising. The fire wasn't coming from a campfire, not a controlled blaze. It flickered too wildly, dancing in unnatural patterns, like something was moving in the flames. My radio crackled suddenly, a burst of static, then a voice. My voice repeating, "Get out?" Bailey growled low. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew then, deep down, it was just beginning. The woods weren't done with us yet, and ran a hand through his tangled hair. "Yeah," he mumbled. "I wanted evidence. Something real. People don't believe until they see." Bailey growled softly, her eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the firelight. I glanced over my shoulder. The forest was dark, too dark, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. "Did you see it?" I asked, my voice low. Jimmy nodded, swallowing hard. "More than once. The thing, it's not like anything you've ever heard about. Tall, silent. It watches. Sometimes it calls, but not like a person. More like a trick, trying to lure you." I felt a chill crawl up my spine, despite the fire's warmth. "Why stay here? Why risk it?" He shrugged. "Because it's real and people need to know. But I'm done. After tonight, I'm gone." Bailey's hackles rose again and her growl deepened. Then, from the edge of the firelight, a sound slipped out. A faint, wet scraping, slow, deliberate. We both froze. Jimmy whispered, "You hear that?" Bailey lunged, barking fiercely, staring into the darkness beyond the fire's reach. I grabbed my flashlight, flicked it on, and swung the beam into the woods. For a moment, nothing. Then two glowing eyes blinked back at us. The fire flickered. The forest exhaled. And the real nightmare began. I didn't think it'd matter. "You know, the park's empty." "It matters," I said. "You could have gotten hurt, or worse." He didn't argue. We both looked exhausted. I thought maybe if I found something, caught it on video, they'd believe me and finally leave it alone. I glanced toward the mine road. The trail dipped past the clearing, disappearing into thick brush and dark trees. It was always darker there, even in daylight. "So you find anything?" I asked. He hesitated. I thought I heard something last night, but I stayed put." "Yeah, good call." Bailey sniffed near the fire, then settled beside him. Jimmy scratched behind her ears. "Well, you got a ride?" I asked. I walked in for the main road. He started, ditched my bike behind a ranger gate. I convinced him it was time to leave, and without much fuss, he packed up. Even stubborn teenagers knew when the jig was up. He doused the fire with a water bottle and kicked dirt over the coals. I waited while he zipped up the tent, then led him back to the truck. The sun was nearly gone. Long strips of gold spilled across the road. The sky above the mine darkened fast. Jimmy sat in the back seat with Bailey. She leaned against him, like she'd already forgiven him. I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. We rolled down the hill, gravel popping under the tires. And just as we rounded the bend by the old mine entrance, I saw it. It stood motionless at the edge of the trees near the mine. Its frame towered over the brush with an unnatural stillness. Its limbs were long and narrow, hanging not in rest but in waiting, and the shape of its head was unmistakable. An old rusted siren sat where a face should be, angled slightly forward, as if listening to something buried deep underground. The metal was dull and pitted, like it had been there for decades. It didn't move, didn't shift. It only watched, rooted to the spot, as if it had always belonged there. I didn't look back after that. There was nothing more to see, and nothing I could have done if I had. My hand stayed on the wheel, my eyes on the road, guiding the truck through the last bend of the trail as the trees closed in tight around us. Bailey shifted once in her seat, but didn't make a sound. In the rear-view mirror, the boy stayed small and still, his face pale in the fading light. We passed the gates without stopping. The fire behind us, the station, the mines, and whatever was standing near them. Even now, I can still see it when I close my eyes. That shape never leaves you. It was too real, too wrong. Not a trick of light or a blurry photo. It was there, part of the landscape, but separate from it. Like something buried too long. Something that didn't belong above ground anymore. I never went back after that night. But I still think about it. What it was doing, what it might still be doing. Not every day. Just often enough to know I'll never really leave this place behind. Not completely. They say you can take the boy out of the woods. But you can't take the woods out of the boy. I used to laugh at that, like it was something parents said when their kids came home tracking mud through the house. Now, I understand what it really means. I left the park that night. Didn't go back the next day, or the week after. I mailed in my keys and never put the uniform back on. The truck sat in the driveway for a long time before I finally sold it. Bailey still gets excited whenever I put on boots. Part of her thinks we're heading out again. We're not. At least, not back there. The park reopened a few months later after the season cooled and the heat on the online stories died down. They cleared the mines out of the brochures, put up better fencing, rebranded the place with a shiny new logo and a social media page. Now, it's just another forest with safe trails and gift shop magnets, but I still check in. The new head ranger sends me emails sometimes. Photos of elk herds, weather updates, the occasional odd question when something strange shows up on a trail cam. He knows what I saw. Or at least, he believes I believe it. That's enough. I'm not a ranger anymore. That chapter is done. There's a certain peace in saying that. But I never forgot what I saw, not just the shape in the trees, not just a boy in the back seat. I never forgot what it meant to see something that wasn't supposed to exist, standing still like it belonged to the land more than I ever did. Siren Head. Sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, doesn't it? Like something out of a comic book or a campfire story. But I saw it with my own eyes. That's not something you just file away and forget. After I left the job, I spent a lot of time looking at maps. Not just of the park, but forests across the country. I started reading things I never would have glanced at before. Old hunter forums, cryptic threads, missing persons databases. The more I read, the more familiar the stories felt. Different places, different names, but the same fear lurking just beneath the surface. Then an old friend reached out. He used to be a ranger too, up north near the Cascades. Said he'd heard about what happened. Something passed quietly from someone to someone. These things do. He asked if I'd ever heard of a man named Sam Carver. I hadn't. Turns out, Carver isn't a ranger. He's something else entirely. I don't know what you'd call him. Not a scientist, not a soldier. But he's made it his life's work to understand the things that don't fit in books. Monsters, if you want to call them that. Phenomena. He calls them anomalies. My friend said Carver's been tracking patterns, disappearances, sightings, even strange frequencies picked up near old industrial sites. He's got files going back decades, pin maps stretching across half the country, and more than once, something like Siren Head shows up right at the edges of the picture. I haven't met Carver yet, but I've got a time and place. It's not official, no uniforms, no government patches on the sleeve. But from what my friend says, Carver has answers. Or at least, the questions are better than the ones I've been asking myself. So I'm going. I don't know where this leads. I'm not promising anything. I just want to understand what I saw. I want to know why something like that was standing in the woods near mine, in a park where kids still walk with Lunchables and cheap cameras. And that's all I can say for now. I've got a bag packed, a dog ready by the door, and a long stretch of road ahead. Maybe someday I'll come back and write more stories. Maybe I won't. But one thing's for sure, there's more to these woods than meets the eye. And there are things out there that can't be explained. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. Special thanks to all my patrons. If you'd like to become a supporter on Patreon, there's a link in the description. Hope you have a great night, and thanks for watching.